If you're a student, you're bound to have walked between campus and the city center up the little winding cobblestone street called Spital. You head up the hill passing the bookshop and the Red Lion pub, then there's a little stretch of grey houses when you reach the top, followed by the downhill. Have you ever looked to your right and wondered about those huge, creepy mansions sitting silently so far from the street? I used to pass them and picture like a rich family with 5 cars and snobby children. However, after a bit of research, I found the houses have a pretty interesting backstory. It goes back to Rutherford, England, 1855, where a man named Jim Mueller founded a convent of nuns and called them the Sisters of St. Margaret. Around 6 years later, Jim Mueller received a letter from an old friend, John Comper, who was a clergy in Aberdeen. Comper asked if some of Mueller's nuns could travel up to Aberdeen and help run a new residential home for impoverished and disabled children. In 1863, the first sister arrived. St. Margaret's Parish was formed and began to grow quickly. Many new children's homes began to be installed around Aberdeen and became known for their good cause. John Comper said, "Underlying it all and permeating it all has been the gentle, unwearied ministration of the devoted sisters who have striven to win the poor at last to godliness and respect." So as it turns out, that large granite house on Spital used to be a home for children. It was run by the nuns until about 1970, and then it closed down. Now this all sounds great, but there's also a dark side to the same story. Recently, a Facebook post went up with an old black and white photo of the house. The photo quickly attracted dozens of comments from elderly men and women who turned out to be the children who had lived in the house decades ago. None of those comments were pleasant to read, so a quick trigger warning. The nuns were actually very abusive. The children were hit with brooms and leather-buckled tea-barrel sandals. Some were locked into the boiler cupboard under the staircase and left all night long. If a child wet his bed, he was dragged into a cold bath, his hair pulled, and his teeth brushed with soap. The nuns often took any money the children arrived with, and there were also reports of sexual abuse. On one of their occasional trips to the beach, a child was told to go back into the water after she'd lost a shoe in the sea. She drowned that day. Everyone was told to keep their mouths shut. There was a playground behind the house, but they were rarely allowed into it. Sometimes they would try to escape over the wall in the garden. So, many years after the fact, these children, now adults, are still trying to understand their past. One woman, now 58, has only just met her biological sister after spending 40 years in search of her. Others hired private investigators, but were warned off by the police. All of the nuns have passed away except Sister Columbia, who's still in Aberdeen but suffers from dementia. The old house stood vacant for many years, but recently has been converted into a residential home for university students. Can you guess who's living there now? Yours truly. The boiler cupboard under the stairs is now home to cleaning supplies, but to me it tells the story of a child sat alone and scared in the dark. The backyard is now an empty square of grass, but I know it was once a small playground with tall fences. It's always been a joke among my housemates that the place is haunted, but as Halloween comes closer, the lights in the house do seem to be dimming. Last night I heard ticking noises from the corners of my bedroom, so if I'm not on student radio next week, you'll know the running joke might not have been just a joke. Don't be surprised, don't be too curious, and most importantly, do not go near that big gray house on Spital. Have a good Halloween, everybody.